The drums rolled like thunder as Lattie stepped fully into the village. Heads began to turn. Whispers followed her footsteps. Who is she? Have you seen her before? She came from the bush. Lattie walked slowly, her back straight, her eyes steady. Every sound felt sharp, every color bright. She saw faces she had only known by voice. Neighbors who once pitied her, others who ignored her, some who mocked her blindness in whispers. Now they stared openly, curious, impressed, unsettled. Toro noticed first. She was in the middle of dancing when her eyes caught the stranger. Her smile faded. Something cold slid down her spine. Who is that? She muttered to her mother. Her mother squinted. Just another woman who came to eat wedding food, she said carelessly. But her laughter sounded forced. Lattie's father was still laughing loudly when Lattie stopped a few steps away from him. She stood there quietly, watching, waiting. Then she spoke. Good afternoon, she said calmly. Her voice sliced through the noise like a knife through cloth. The drum slowed. Conversations paused. People turned fully now. Lattie's father froze. That voice. His cup slipped from his hand and fell, spilling palm wine into the dust. EBA lifted his head sharply. His heart skipped, then began to pound, painfully. He stood up slowly, staring at her as if pulled by something stronger than reason. Who are you? Lattie's father asked, forcing a laugh. You are welcome. Come and eat. Lattie smiled faintly. I did not come to eat, she said. I came to see. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. To see what? An elder asked. Lattie's eyes moved calmly across the gathering. Then they stopped on her mother. Lattie's mother looked up. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Her mother's breath caught in her throat. Her hands began to shake. She stood up slowly, her knees weak. Lat, she whispered, barely audible. Lattie's eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. Yes, Mama, she said gently. It is me. A scream tore out of the woman's chest. She ran forward and grabbed Lattie, touching her face, her hair, her arms, as if afraid she would disappear. My child, my child, my child. The village exploded into chaos. That is Lattie, but she was blind. She drowned. How can this be? Lattie's father staggered back, his face draining of color. This is not possible, he whispered. Lattie gently pulled away from her mother and turned to face him. You told me to trust you, she said quietly. You told me I would not fall. Her words were calm, but they burned. The drum stopped completely. I trusted your voice, she continued, and you pushed me to my death. Gasps filled the air. Toro stepped forward angrily. You are lying. Lattie turned and looked at her sister fully for the first time. No, she said. I am finally seeing. She faced the elders now. This man, she said, pointing at her father, took me to the bridge because a wealthy man wanted to marry me. He wanted me gone so my sister could take my place. All eyes turned to EBA. He stepped forward slowly, his voice shaking. It is true, he said. I asked for Lattie, not Toro. A wave of shock swept through the crowd. Lattie's father fell to his knees. She was a curse, he shouted desperately. She brought shame. Lattie walked closer until she stood right in front of him. I brought you nothing, she said softly. You brought this upon yourself. She reached for the shell necklace at her neck. The river stirred. A low wind swept through the village. The ground felt cold beneath their feet. Lattie looked up at the sky and spoke clearly. Rona. The river roared. Rona. Water surged violently. Rona. The river rose, swirling and alive. A deep voice echoed, not loud but powerful. The truth has been spoken. The water pulled. Lattie's father screamed as invisible force dragged him toward the river. He clawed at the ground, begging, crying, calling names, but no one moved. The river took him. Silence fell. Lattie turned back to the village. I forgive no one who does not change, she said calmly, but I will not hide anymore. She faced EBA. If you still wish to marry me, she said, it will be as the woman I am, not the girl they tried to erase. EBA knelt before her. I have always chosen you, he said. Lattie looked at her mother, who nodded through tears. Lattie smiled, soft, strong, free. And in the distance, beneath the water, Rona watched. The river was satisfied. The village remained frozen long after the river grew quiet again. No drums, no laughter, only the sound of shallow breathing and pounding hearts. Slowly, people began to kneel, not because they were told to, but because truth has weight and it presses the body down. Lattie stood at the center of it all, steady as the earth beneath her feet. Her mother clung to her arm, still touching her as if afraid she would vanish again. "You came back," she whispered again and again. "You came back." "I promised," Lattie replied softly. Toro trembled where she stood. The pride had drained from her face, replaced by fear and shame. Her mother pulled her closer, suddenly silent, suddenly aware that laughter has consequences. One of the elders cleared his throat. His voice shook. "Lattie, daughter of this land," he said carefully, "you were wronged in the worst way. Speak. What do you ask of us?" Lattie took a slow breath. For a moment, she remembered the bridge, the creaking wood, her father's voice telling her to trust. Then she remembered the river, Rona's hands, the gift of sight. "I did not ask for blood," Lattie said calmly. "The river has already judged." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. "I asked for truth," she continued. "Let no child be called a curse because they are different. Let no mother be silenced when her heart is screaming. Let no father believe power gives him the right to destroy life." She turned to Toro. "You wanted what was offered to you," Lattie said, not cruelly, not kindly, just truthfully. "But what is stolen never sits in peace." Toro burst into tears and fell to her knees. "I didn't know he would kill you," she sobbed. "I swear." Lattie watched her for a long moment. "Now you know," she said. "Live better." She turned back to the elders. "The wedding is over," she said. But the celebration is not. Confusion spread across their faces. Lattie reached for EBA's hand. He stood, still overwhelmed, still in awe. "If you still wish to walk beside me," she said, "then we will do it openly. With no lies. With no shame." EBA nodded, his eyes shining. "I will walk with you anywhere," he said. The elders exchanged looks. One by one, they nodded. "So it shall be," the eldest said. "Not today. Today is for healing." That night, the village changed. Women gathered around Lattie's mother, apologizing, crying, listening. For the first time in many years, she was not alone. Men spoke quietly about what they had seen, what they had allowed, what they would never allow again. And at the riverbank, Lattie stood alone for a moment, the moonlight dancing on the water. "Rona," she whispered once. The water shimmered softly. "I will return," Lattie said. "But not yet." The river rippled in answer like a smile. Lattie turned back toward the village, toward her future, her love, her truth. She had gone into the river as a child meant to disappear. She returned as a woman the world could no longer ignore. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. They were the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when broken things lie exposed and must be rebuilt by hand. Lattie stayed in her mother's hut. At night, they slept side by side like they used to, her mother's hand resting on Lattie's arm, as if touch alone could confirm reality. "I still hear your voice calling me," her mother whispered one night. "Even when you were gone." Lattie closed her eyes. "I heard you too, Mama, even under the river." Her mother held her tighter and wept, not from pain this time, but from release. The village elders called a gathering 3 days later. Not for celebration, not for judgment, for reckoning. Men, women, and children sat beneath the old Irako tree. The air was heavy, respectful. No one laughed. No drums were beaten. The eldest elder stood and spoke. "What happened to Lattie happened because we looked away," he said. "Because we allowed silence to become law." Murmurs of agreement spread. "We failed a child. We failed a mother." Lattie was invited to speak, but she shook her head gently. "My voice has been loud enough," she said. "Let your actions speak now." From that day, things began to change, slowly, imperfectly, but truly. A blind boy who had been hidden in his uncle's house was brought into the open and taught a trade. A girl who limped was no longer mocked, but helped. Mothers spoke more freely. Fathers listened more carefully. Pain does not vanish overnight, but it can lose its power. EBA visited Lattie often. He never touched her without permission, never spoke over her, never rushed her grief. One evening, as they sat near the riverbank, he finally spoke. I loved you before I ever saw your face, he said quietly. Your voice carried truth. Now I see your strength too, and it humbles me. Lattie looked at the water, then back at him. I am not the girl you wanted to save, she said. I am a woman who survived. He nodded. That is who I choose. They said nothing more, but the river listened. Toro and her mother left the village before the next moon. Not chased, not cursed, just unable to stay. Some lessons are too heavy to carry in the place where they were learned. One night, when the village slept, Lattie returned to the river alone. She stood barefoot at the water's edge, moonlight silvering her skin. The shell necklace felt warm against her chest. Rona, she called softly. The water stirred. Rona. The river glowed faintly. Rona. The surface broke, and she rose, calm, watchful, eternal. You kept your promise, Rona said. Lattie smiled. So did you. Do you regret returning? Rona asked. Lattie shook her head. No, but I will not forget where I came from. Rona studied her for a long moment. Then the gift remains, she said. Your sight, your truth, your protection. Lattie bowed her head. Thank you for choosing me. Rona's voice softened. I did not choose you because you were weak. I chose you because you endured. The river closed again. Months later, a wedding took place, not loud, not proud, but full of meaning. Lattie walked beside Ibe, not behind him. Her mother stood, smiling, tears shining openly. The village watched with respect, not pity. And when Lattie spoke her vows, her voice carried across land and water alike. I was pushed into darkness, she said, but I learned to breathe there. I learned to see. I returned not as a victim, but as a witness. Far beneath the river, Rona listened. The tide was calm. Years passed, but Lattie's story did not fade, it deepened. Time softened the sharp edges of pain, but it never erased memory. Instead, memory became wisdom, and wisdom became purpose. Lattie and Ibe built a life that the village watched with quiet respect. Their home was never locked. Children gathered there in the evenings to listen to stories, to learn songs, to rest. Lattie welcomed them all, especially those who felt different, unseen, or unwanted. They called her Mother of Clear Eyes, not because she saw more than others, but because she taught others how to see. One Harmattan evening, Lattie sat outside, plaiting a young girl's hair. The girl was blind in one eye and shy about it. Will people laugh at me? The girl asked softly. Lattie smiled. Some will, she replied honestly, but the ones who matter will learn. The girl nodded, comforted. Inside the hut, Ibe watched his wife with pride. He had learned that love is not rescue, it is partnership. Lattie's mother grew older, but her laughter returned. Sometimes she would sit by the river and hum the songs she once sang to her blind child. Now, she sang to the water itself. The river gave you back to me, she would say. Lattie would smile, touching her shell necklace gently. One night, a storm came. Rain fell hard. The river swelled and growled, restless and loud. People gathered anxiously, fearing floods. Lattie stood up suddenly. I must go, she said. Ibe caught her arm. Where? To the river, she replied calmly. He did not stop her. She stood at the water's edge as rain soaked her hair and clothes. Rona, she called. The river answered immediately. Rona rose, her eyes serious. The balance is shifting, Rona said. There is anger in the water. Lattie nodded. Because humans forget again. Rona looked at her carefully. You are no longer just a survivor. You are a bridge between land and river, pain and truth. Lattie felt the weight of the words. What must I do? She asked. Rona extended her hand. Walk with me, she said. Not away from the world, but deeper into it. Lattie hesitated only a moment. Then she turned back once, to Ibe, standing silently behind her. I will return, she said. I know, he replied. She stepped into the water. From that day on, stories spread. They said the river calmed when Lattie walked near it. They said children who fell and never drowned. They said cruel men dreamed of bridges cracking beneath their feet. Lattie became a living warning and a living promise. She did not live in the river. She did not leave the land. She lived between. And long after her hair turned silver, long after her steps slowed, the river still whispered her name. Not as a victim, not as a miracle. And even after Lattie's hair turned fully silver, the river still waited for her voice. One season, long after her children had grown and her grandchildren had learned to swim at the river's edge, a stranger came to the village. He arrived at dusk, walking with a limp, his clothes dusty, his eyes restless. He asked for Lattie. "Which Lattie?" someone asked cautiously. "The woman who listens to water," the stranger replied. The villagers exchanged looks and led him to her home. Lattie was sitting outside, sorting grains, her movements slow but sure. When the stranger spoke, her hands stilled. "I was told you could help me," he said. "The river near my land has turned cruel. Children disappear. Crops fail. People say it is cursed." Lattie lifted her head and looked at him, not with fear, not with pride, but with understanding. "Rivers do not turn cruel without reason," she said. "They only reflect what is poured into them." The man's shoulders sagged. "Then it is our fault," he whispered. Lattie nodded once. "Sit," she said. "Tell me everything." That night, as the moon climbed, Lattie listened, truly listened, to stories of greed, broken promises, land stolen, voices silenced. When the man finished, Lattie stood with effort, leaning briefly on her staff. "I will come," she said. They reached the troubled river 3 days later. It roared violently, dark and swollen. People stood far away, afraid. Lattie walked forward alone. She removed her sandals and stepped into the water. The river surged. "Rona." Lattie called, not loudly but clearly. The water trembled. "Rona." The current slowed. "Rona." The river split gently and she rose, unchanged by time, unchanged by age. "You have lived long," Rona said softly. "Because you gave me breath," Lattie replied. Rona looked at the river, then at the people hiding in fear. "This river is angry," Rona said. "It has been fed lies and blood." Lattie turned to the people. "You cannot ask the water for mercy while refusing it yourselves," she said. "Return what you stole. Speak the truth you buried. Heal what you broke." Some cried. Some fell to their knees. Some ran away. The river watched them all. When the first act of truth was done, when land was returned and apologies spoken aloud, the river's roar softened. Rona smiled faintly. "The work is yours now," she told Lattie. "I will not always rise." Lattie bowed her head. "I understand." Years later, when Lattie felt her breath growing light and her steps heavy, she returned to the first river, the one that almost took her life. EBA walked beside her, old now, gentle and quiet. "I will wait," he said at the bank. Lattie smiled at him and stepped forward alone. "Rona," she called, her voice thin but steady. The water shimmered. "You are ready," Rona said, rising beside her. Lattie nodded. "I am not afraid." Rona held out her hand. Lattie turned once more to the land, to the village, the huts, the people who had learned. Then she stepped into the river. This time she did not struggle. She did not fall. She walked. After that day, the villagers say 2 women walked the rivers, one made of water and memory, one made of flesh and truth. And when a child stands at the edge of fear and hears a gentle voice say, "Trust me," the river listens, and it chooses carefully. Long after Lattie's footprints faded from the riverbank, her presence did not. Children born years later grew up hearing her name the way one hears the wind, never seen, always felt. When a child was different, elders would say, "Do not hide them. Remember, Lattie." When anger rose too fast, someone would whisper, "The river is listening." And when the water swelled after heavy rains, mothers would stand at the edge and speak softly, not in fear, but in respect. EBA lived many seasons after Lattie walked into the river. He never remarried. He never left the village. Every morning, he swept the space near the riverbank where she had last stood. Every evening, he sat there quietly, speaking to the water as though she could hear. And sometimes, just sometimes, the river answered with a gentle ripple. When EBA finally joined his ancestors, the village buried him facing the river as he requested. "Because that is where my life learned how to love," he said. Years later, during a dry season when rivers shrank and crops struggled, a small girl wandered too close to the water while playing. She slipped. The village screamed. But the river did not take her. Instead, the child felt hands, firm, steady, lifting her gently to the shore. She swore she heard a woman's voice say, "Breathe." When the girl opened her eyes, there was no one there. Only calm water. Only silence. Only life. The elders knew then. Lattie had not become a spirit of revenge. She had become a keeper. Not of punishment, but of balance. Not of fear, but of truth. And so the story is told this way, from one generation to the next. There was once a blind girl who was called a curse. She trusted a voice and was pushed into darkness. But the darkness did not destroy her. It taught her how to see. She returned not to beg, not to cry, but to stand. And when she was done standing, she walked into the river, not as someone escaping the world, but as someone watching over it. If you ever stand at the edge of water and feel calm for no reason, if you ever hear kindness where cruelty once lived, if you ever survive what was meant to end you, remember, and still, the river carries more than memory. On certain nights, when the moon is thin like a blade and the water shines dark as glass, people say the river changes its voice. It no longer rushes. It no longer growls. It hums. Old women pause mid-story. Fishermen lower their nets. Children fall silent without knowing why. Because the hum is a warning and a promise. Far from the village, in places where Lattie's name was never spoken, cruelty continued its work. Fathers silenced daughters. Mothers swallowed pain. Children learned to disappear quietly. But the river travels. One by one, rivers began to remember. A girl pushed into a stream in the night did not sink. A boy thrown into a well was lifted by unseen hands. A woman who leapt into water in despair found herself breathing, floating, held. Always the same whisper. Breathe. Scholars argued about it. Priests tried to explain it. Some said it was superstition. But the women knew. They taught their daughters to listen, to water, to silence, to the small voice inside that says this is wrong. They taught their sons that strength without mercy rots. And slowly, slowly, the world tilted, just enough. Deep beneath the first river, where glowing stones never dim, Rona stands beside another figure now. Lattie is no longer bound by age. Her eyes carry storms and sunrise. Her hands carry calm. You have done well, Rona says. Lattie smiles, not proud, not weary. I only stood where I was pushed, she replies. The rest followed. Rona looks toward the surface. Do you miss it? Lattie watches the currents, faces, lives, choices flowing past. Yes, she says softly, but I am still there. And somewhere above, a child stands at a bridge. Someone calls sweetly, falsely, "Come." Trust me. The child hesitates, then stops, then steps back, because the water below does not whisper fear. It whispers truth, and the river, Lattie's river, is awake, and the river never forgets. Years became decades, but Lattie's presence beneath the water never waned. Travelers who strayed too close to the river at night claimed to see a faint glow, like moonlight caught in flowing hair. Some heard gentle laughter carried over the current. Others swore they saw a woman standing at the river's edge, long hair shimmering, eyes calm but impossibly knowing. Villagers came to understand that she was both there and not there, watching, protecting, guiding. She did not intervene unless necessary, but the subtle sway of the river seemed to echo her will. A man about to strike a child would suddenly slip. A mother about to abandon her crying baby would find her arms frozen by hesitation. The water reminded them, do no harm. One evening, a young girl from another village wandered far upstream. She was small and timid, carrying a basket of food for her family. The path was slippery, and a sudden misstep sent her tumbling toward the river. She screamed. The current swallowed her at once, but she did not drown. Hands soft, sure, invisible, lifted her gently, spinning her above the water, floating her until she could stand on the riverbank. The girl's eyes widened. She heard a faint whisper that trembled like the wind. Breathe. You are alive. You are seen. The girl fell to her knees and pressed her hands to the ground, tears streaming. When she dared to look, no one was there. Only the river shimmered in the moonlight. She ran home with a story of a woman in the water, a guardian who carried life in her hands. The tale spread far and wide. Not every adult believed it, but every child did. Every child who learned of Lattie understood instinctively that the river was alive, that it could protect the innocent, that it could punish cruelty with subtle yet undeniable force. And in that way, Lattie's story grew, not as rumor, not as legend, not as myth, but as law. A quiet law, whispered in streams and lakes, in rainfall and tides, that those who tried to harm others would face more than their own conscience. Deep beneath the water, Rona and Lattie watched together. Lattie's eyes, once blind, now glimmered with wisdom older than any human could measure. "Do you ever tire?" Rona asked. Lattie shook her head. "No, not while the world needs me. And if they forget, they will not. The river remembers. I remember. And when the river flows, it teaches again." The water around them pulsed gently, glowing with 1,000 tiny lights, reflecting stories of those saved and those changed. It was calm. It was alive. And so, generations later, children still approach rivers with reverence. They do not run. They do not shout. They listen. And sometimes, in the glimmering surface or the soft whisper of current, they hear a familiar word. Breathe. And for those who know the story, the river answers, not with wrath, not with cruelty, but with protection, hope, and an unending reminder. A life that was almost lost can become a force that changes the world. Years turned into decades. The village itself changed, rebuilt, and grew. Families prospered, but none forgot the tale of the girl who once disappeared into the river and returned transformed. Parents told the story to their children not as a fairy tale, but as a lesson in courage, truth, and justice. Lattie's mother lived to see her grandchildren play by the riverbank. She would smile, remembering the child she once held, the one who had been nearly lost. Sometimes she would hear the faintest echo of a voice, soft and gentle, calling her by name. She would close her eyes, nod, and whisper a prayer of gratitude. One spring, a boy stumbled while fishing in a rapid upstream. He fell into the rushing water, panicked, and began to sink. The villagers screamed, rushing to save him, but the current itself seemed to hesitate. And then a hand, soft, strong, unwavering, lifted him gently to the river's edge. The boy looked around, eyes wide. There was no one to be seen, only the calm, shimmering river. "Breathe," a faint voice whispered. The boy nodded, stunned. From that day on, he told everyone he met. The river protects those who are innocent, those who are afraid, and those who dare to be true. Lattie, now a figure of legend, still existed beneath the water alongside Rona. She had become more than a woman. She had become a guardian of life itself, a bridge between the human world and the unseen depths. Rona would sometimes ask, "Do you ever tire?" Lattie would smile, her eyes reflecting currents and stars. "No. As long as children need protection, as long as the innocent need safety, I cannot tire." "And if the world forgets you?" Rona asked. "The river never forgets," Lattie replied. "And as long as it flows, I will teach again." Generations later, the village children grew up knowing one truth above all: the river listens. They learned to respect it, to walk carefully, to speak honestly, to protect each other. And in times of danger, when cruelty or greed appeared, they felt it, Lattie's presence beneath the currents, quiet, unwavering, ready to act. Farmers would leave offerings by the water, not out of superstition, but as a sign of respect. Travelers would pause at riverbanks and whisper thanks, sensing the power of a guardian watching over them. And sometimes, when the moon was thin and silver, villagers claimed they could hear her voice, soft and eternal. "Breathe. You are alive. You are seen. You are not alone." Thus, the blind girl who was almost lost became a force that could never be destroyed. Her story became more than legend. It became law, written into the hearts of every generation. The river remembers. The innocent are never forgotten. And those who survive cruelty can become the guardians of the world itself. The centuries passed, and Lattie's presence beneath the river became eternal, no longer just a woman, but a living memory, a force woven into the currents themselves. The village, now thriving, had changed completely. Fields were fertile, children laughed freely, and parents no longer feared difference or weakness. Teachers taught lessons of courage and truth, often telling the story of the girl who had walked into the river and returned transformed. But Lattie's story had grown beyond the village. In distant towns, children who fell into streams survived without harm. Travelers who lost their way near rivers found themselves guided to safety by invisible hands. Fishermen and farmers spoke of gentle ripples, currents that seemed to push them forward instead of drowning them, of whispers in the water that felt like comfort. Everywhere, the river carried her lesson. Cruelty may push, but the innocent endure. Fear may fall, but truth rises. Darkness may press, but courage flows. Beneath the deepest currents, Rona swam beside Lattie, watching centuries roll like waves. "You have done more than survive," Rona said, her glowing eyes reflecting the endless waters. "I only lived," Lattie replied, her voice calm as the river itself. "Everything else, the guidance, the protection, it is the river's and mine only in part." Rona tilted her head. "Soon, you will no longer need to return. You will become one with the river itself." Lattie closed her eyes, feeling the current swirl around her, feeling the memories of every life she had touched. "Then it is time," she said softly. On the next moonless night, she rose to the river's surface for the last time. EBA's descendants had heard the story, but none knew exactly when she would leave the land of humans forever. Lattie called gently, "Rona." The water shimmered and parted as though obeying a command older than time. Light poured from the depths. The currents lifted her, spiraling around her in a dance of water and moonlight. Her long hair streamed like black silk, her glowing skin reflecting the stars. Then, with a final step, she walked into the river. The water embraced her, and her body dissolved into currents, into mist, into light. Her eyes, the gift of Rona, closed for the last time as she merged completely with the river. She was everywhere at once, flowing beneath every stream, whispering in every ripple, glimmering in every moonlit wave. The next morning, villagers found the river calm and sparkling as though touched by magic. No child feared its depths. No parent hesitated to let their children play nearby. Fishermen whispered thanks before casting their nets. Travelers bowed briefly when crossing streams. Some claimed that at dusk, a faint figure could be seen moving beneath the surface, a dark-haired woman whose eyes glowed like stars. Others said they felt a gentle hand guiding them back to shore when danger approached. And always, softly, the voice whispered, "Breathe. You are alive. You are seen. You are not alone." Lattie had become more than a guardian. She had become a river of memory, of justice, and of hope. Every generation knew her story, not as myth, but as truth written into the waters. The rivers of the world remembered. The innocent were never forgotten. And wherever water flowed, her presence endured, eternal, unyielding, and alive.